welcome back. I hope that you are having an amazing day. We're supposed to be walking into a weekend of misery. It's supposed to be cold and windy. We're supposed to be walking into a weekend of what's going on over here, we're meant to be spending this time right now just getting ourselves ready for this amazing Shabbat. And it's a hard Shabbat to get ready for because the Shabbat is Parashat Haye Sarah. And the challenge of Parashat Haye Sarah is you start off in this very sad kind of way. Parasha begins with telling us that Vayu Haye Sarah Mea Shana Ve'esrim Shana, tells us about her death. She was 127 years old. And she dies, and it's painful. Sarah is not someone who you hear much of in the Chumash. You don't really hear much of her voice being shared, but you know that in the background, every time you hear Avraham, you hear a little bit of Sarah kind of like breaking through. So I want to try to put the last this parasha, into like one bigger theme, and hopefully we'll all walk away with something super meaningful. Last week's parasha ended with Akedat Yitzchak, this massive test. Massive test of Abraham offering up his son as a sacrifice. And no, he passes flying colors. Parasha ends with this idea last week, before he even comes and finds out about Sarah. It says that Abraham ends up hearing about his brother. He finds out of his brother. Remember, Abraham had two brothers. One is Haran. Haran dies. He gets thrown to the Kishana Esh, burnt. And then he has another brother called Nahor, who ends up marrying Haran's daughter, right? His niece. Abraham marries one daughter. Her name is Sarai. And Nahor marries the other sister named Milcah. He just finished the test of offering up Yitzchak on the Akedah, and now he's getting this news that his brother has all these kids named Utz and Buz and Kumel and Ahizav and Keshed and Achazo and Pildash and Yidlaf and Betuel. He has all these kids, and we get to hear about Rivka. And it just seems like a nice little, the Torah's way of kind of like, hey, by the way, intermission, this is a little bit of news about Nahor. And we get to Rivka, which is related to the whole story of Abraham sending Eliezer to find a shidduch for Yitzchak. But Chachamim say something different. This is all part of the test. Abraham is promised two major things earlier, right? Number one, I'm going to give you the land of Eretz Yisrael, you're going to inherit it, okay? Number two is I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to make you into a great nation. You're going to be as important, as significant as all the stars, and as numerous as all the sand, right? This is what's going to end up happening for you. I'm going to do everything I can to you will see, you will be blessed in every way. How does the parasha end and begin? It ends with Abraham about to sacrifice his only son. It ends with him finding out that his brother has way more kids than he does. And it begins with him not even having a place to bury his wife. He's got nothing. He has no place to bury his wife. He has a son who's 37 years old, no shidduch. And, where's all the promises? Pasha continues and tells us that Abraham, not only does he not have a place to bury his wife, right? He has to go ahead and buy this field from a guy named Efron. And the Torah goes through a lot of telling us a lot of these things of Efron and the dealings with Efron. And the Gemara says, you know what? We learned halachot from Efron about how we go ahead and make a chuppah, right? How you go ahead and you make a kinyan, how you acquire a wife. And the question is why? Why is there a relationship between Abraham purchasing a field of Efron and us making weddings, the wedding ceremony itself? Why is there any kind of relationship? Efron was an evil guy. He was there to swindle, bamboozle Abraham out of as much money as he can. And Abraham is a good guy, and he's being taken advantage of. Like, why would you want this horrific story of a man literally taking advantage of another man's sorrow and literally squeezing out every single penny out of him? to be related to how we make a ceremony at a wedding. And then the pasuk continues, the Parasha continues, and we'll end with this one last idea, and I'll try to kind of like tie it all together. It says, "Va'Avram zaken ba bayamim," and Avram was old, and he came with all his years. Hashem berech et Avraham bako, and Avraham is blessed with everything. What does that mean? It's interesting. It says, "Va'Avram zaken." He is old. Ba bayamim means he's coming with his days. It means he's really old. So why do you have a double lashon in the pasuk? And then it tells us, "V'Hashem berech et Avraham bakol," and he is blessed with everything. Why is this here? What are we supposed to learn from all of this? I want to make one more mention of one more idea, and then we'll try to like weave through the questions and see if we could walk away with, again, a deeper integrated understanding of the Parasha. So number one is that if we look at last week's Parasha, Parashat Ve'era, you have these massive sweeping stories about world wars and kings and abductions and these massive interactions, big consequential things that would have impact the world history forever, right? And these massive epic stories. And then over here in this week's Parasha, it's a Parasha about a man burying his wife, about a man finding a wife for the son. And then we have all these details about Eliezer looking for the test, to test the girl, to see if she's the right girl for the husband, for his master. And it repeats it twice. The Parasha, the Torah is always super, super frugal when it comes to using its words. We have halachot that we learn from a letter change. Why do we have to go through all this details in the Parasha of hearing about the whole story of Eliezer and testing and coming back and retelling the story? Why is it there? So, number one, the Parashiot are always a reminder about human psychology, right? Sometimes we live in a world where our days are full. They have massive consequences. And sometimes we have boring days, not much gets done. There are smaller things. But the question is, how do we relate to these things? Are we all in when it comes to how we invest our time? Or are we kind of like, we sway around back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? You know, the idea is like this: just like seasons change, people have seasons. We change. There are times of the year where we're meant to be involved in bigger things, and there are times of the year we need to be very hyper-focused on the small things. So the Parasha is relating to that. Why do we spend all this time learning about Eliezer and his journeys? Very simple. The Torah is obsessed with midot. And when it comes to learning about character traits, which are so elusive because we're so stuck in our own little box, the Torah is going to spend as much as it can to tell you all about it. This is how you find out about a person's midot. This is how you test, because chesed, kindness, these traits are the backbone of what it means to be a Jew. You can't have Torah without having access to midot. It doesn't work. If you don't have compassion, you don't have the ability to be patient, you don't have the ability of going ahead and loving people around you, the Torah doesn't work. You can know everything about the Torah, all the halachot, but if you don't have basic common decency, it doesn't stick. The canvas that we paint our Torah on is midot. And therefore the Torah is going to go out of its way and tell you about all these amazing things these people did to teach us about their midot. So don't think of it as just a story that's being told. Read it as a way of learning the true depth, the nature of the psychology that we're meant to have for ourselves. The kind of midot we're supposed to incorporate into our lives, the kind of things we're meant to be doing and worrying about. So Abraham is tested with the brothers, his brothers' children. He's tested with not having a land, no legacy. So how does he respond to all of it? Does he say, hey, God, where's all the stuff you promised me? Hey, God, where are all these things you told me you're going to go ahead, and you told me about the land, you told me about my children, I got nothing? What does Abraham do? You know what the first lesson of this week's Parasha is? Stop complaining. The first lesson of the Parasha is when things don't go your way, you get up and you push to get what you want to go. You want to make God's promises true? You have to stand up sometimes and put in your own hishtadlut and do it yourself. He doesn't cry to God and say, God, give me the land. He spends top dollar in buying a piece of property, ridiculously overpriced, to go ahead and bury his wife, because Hashem hasn't given him the land. He's going to get up and buy the land. I'll do it. I'll show you, Hashem, how this is important to me. He doesn't have a shidduch for his son. What does he do? He sends Eliezer, his trusted servant, to go out and find a girl for his son. He's not waiting for the miracle to happen. Rabbi, I pray all the time. I do all these things. How come Hashem? Don't ask how come Hashem hasn't done for you. The question is, why haven't you done for yourself? When you create the conduit of bracha, of standing up for yourself, that's when Hashem sends down the shefa. That's when Hashem opens up the gates of parnasa. That's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends you the power to achieve the things that you want. He opens the wells of bracha only when he sees you are willing to get up and stand up to do the things that you need to do for yourself. And when you have that, boom, everything pops. He gets everything. He gets the land. Ultimately, he gets a shidduch. Now, it's interesting because we're talking about a person who lived 3,500 years ago. And if you were Abraham looking at the story, you know, you would say, Abraham, I'm so sorry to tell you, it doesn't look very good for you. All these promises that God made you doesn't look very good, because we know the history a little bit, right? We know like 500 years of history, 400 years of history. He has a son, Yitzchak. He's only got 2 kids, twins, right? Yaakov, okay, he gets a little bit of 12 kids. We don't have a massive story of a massive nation coming through Abraham. And then Yaakov and his children end up coming down to Mitzrayim. What ends up happening over there? They're enslaved. For 500 years, it looks like everything that God promised to Abraham is looking very, very bad. It doesn't look like it's coming to fruition. But we look back now 3,500 years later and we see that everything that God promised to Abraham becomes a reality, right? The land of Israel, we get, we lose, we get back again. Greatest story ever, greatest comeback story ever. We have the story of his children, the things that Am Yisrael have given to the world doesn't make any sense, defies logic. The innovation that comes out of Israel today makes no sense. You look at Israel got its independence the same year that India did, same time. And look at, and India has 1.3 billion people, a lot of human capital. Israel has about 7 million people. Okay, the error, the margin of error in the census in India is like 15 million. Like that's almost, it's about 150 million. It's like 10 times the amount of Jews living in the world is the margin of error in India, right? Talking about massive numbers. They have everything. They have natural resources. They got human capital. Israel has nothing. We're surrounded by enemies. We're under war, and somehow still they're able to create these amazing innovations for the world. Where does that come from? It comes from these brachot. It comes from the idea that Hashem blesses Avram bakol with everything. Hashem berech et Avram bakol. So, what does it mean? V'Avraham zakenu ba'bayamim. What does it mean that he's old? So we know, Chachamim tell us the word zaken comes from the words koneh ze koneh chokhmah, right? This person has acquired wisdom, right? That coming with old age comes, you get you get some wisdom. You learn a little bit about, the right thing, the wrong thing to do. You get that ability of kind of having a good feel for things. So what does it mean that Avraham zakenu baba yamim, right? It means that Abraham lived his life to such a full expression of his potential that his days and his years were all joined to one. Some people only have a good day, maybe a good month, a good week, but Avraham, every single day was a perfect day. Every single day for Abraham was a day where he was able to actualize his full potential. What was that potential? What was the special thing that Avraham had that he was able to pull with him at the end of his life? You know what it was? It was the fact that he lived a life of hesed. He lived a life where every single moment he lived his unique midot to the fullest. He did everything he could to ensure that every moment was a moment where he expressed this kind of kindness. So what is that teach you? When you live a life of Baba Yamim, when you live a life of kindness, when you live a life where you are literally giving every moment of yourself to somebody else, what does God do? He barech et Abraham bako. Where does the bracha come from? The bracha, the blessing that we have in our lives, comes from our ability to give back to the world around you. We know that there is a reciprocal over here, that when you do for humanity, God will do for you. When you go ahead and you act in chesed, God will open up and do chesed for you as well. You are unable to go ahead and give back. What ends up happening, God may, God forbid, pull back as well. We don't want that. The story of Abraham is a story about taking responsibility. The story of Abraham is a story of recognizing that every single moment of life is a unique expression of opportunity, of potential that you and I need to squeeze into the world. That's what the Parasha is about. It's about our lives. How do we value our time? Do we live a life like Sarah, vayu Haye Sarah, me'ah shana, ve'esrim shana, ve'sheva shanim, shnei Haye Sarah, all the details about the different aspects of her lives? She maximizes every single moment of time. Do we? The story over here is meant to inspire us, my friends. It's meant to get us to be animated, to be excited. It's a sad story that Abraham is test with the loss of Sarah, right? But look what the pasuk says. It says, "Vatamat Sarah bekiryat Arba." She dies, right? But who Hebron, in the city of Hebron, be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan, ve'yavo Abraham, and Abraham comes lispod the Sarah, to eulogize Sarah ulebichta, and he cries. And the Chachamim point out over here again, this is a weird, strange sequence of events that he finds out that she passes away in Kiryat Arba. Why do we need to know that she's in Kiryat Arba? What does Rashi say? It's called Kiryat Arba for two reasons. One, for the name of the four giants that live there. There were Al Shem Arba Anakim Shayu Sham, right? It's called Kiryat Arba because there are four giants that live there. By the way, these giants were Rishaim. And then to tell you later, Arba Zugot Shenikravu Sham, the four Zugot, the four couples that were buried there, Adam and Chava, Abraham and Sarah, Rivka, Yitzchak and Rivka, Abraham and Leah. Those are the four couples that are there. Now, the rabbis ask, why do you got a name? Why does Rashi got to tell me the name of these four giants? They were Rashaim. They were evil people. Why is Sarah, why did she die in a city of these evil men? Why do we need to know this? Now remember, Hebron is different than Yerushalayim, right? Remember, there's four holy cities in Israel. Do you remember their names? It's been so long that I've been to Israel. It's unbelievable. I haven't been into Israel. This is the longest time in the last 20 years that I've been away from Israel. I mean, normally in Israel 4 or 5 times a year, and this is the first time. It's been a year. It's almost 18 months since my feet have been planted down in the land of Israel. There's 4 holy cities in Eretz Yisrael. Number 1, Yerushalayim. You got it right. Number 2, Hebron. Number 3, Tzfat. Number 4, Tiberia. And the Chachamim teaches, the Mekubalim teaches that each one of these 4 cities represents a different element, right? Tiberia, by the water, that's water. That's right. Tzfat, the airy, windy mountains of Tzfat, that is wind. Yerushalayim, you guessed it, fire. Karbanot, fire came down. Hebron, earth. Okay? Now, the rabbis teach us that Hebron, that Yerushalayim's power is fire. It was built with fire and it'll be destroyed with fire. This is sad relationship we have with Jerusalem. It has the power to build and the power to destroy. But Hebron is earth. And the earth itself cannot be destroyed. It's unique in this way. And Abraham specifically wants to be buried in Hebron with his wife to teach us a very powerful lesson. And it's the same reason why we named the names of these 4 Anakim, these four giants who are Rishaim, to teach you that Hebron is a place of connection that can never be destroyed. And no matter how far we go, no matter how far we remove ourselves from our connection, Parasha is teaching you that we're always going to be connected. There's always a connection that can never be destroyed. There's something in Yiddish we call the pintel yid, right? There's a little spark in each Jew. No matter how far we go, there's always going to be some way of coming back and finding that connection. Our job is to never give up on the people around us. Because just like in this week's Parasha, Abraham is buried in Hebron. He goes out of his way to pick a place that's connected to the earth to remind us no matter what we do, we can never sever that connection. But Abraham comes and he eulogizes and then cries. And normally when you hear about someone passing away, what do? You first cry, and then you eulogize. So if you look at the pasuk, you'll notice it right in the beginning. The word ula bichta, there's a font change. The letter chaf is really small. All the other fonts are about a 20, and the chaf in that when that word is like a 10, half the size of the other fonts. So the question is why. So the first is like this: Abraham is someone who's completely in control of his emotions, and had he come down and start crying before eulogizing, people may have thought that Abraham regretted doing everything that he did because he lost his wife. Didn't want to show that. He wanted to show that he was someone who was in control of his emotions. That I'm first going to get myself super cerebral. I'm going to think about everything about who Sarah is. And my goal right now is to teach the world of the beauty of who this woman was. He first eulogizes her and then he cries. And it's a small chaf to show you that he held back his tears even. He wanted to cry. He wanted to go ahead and mourn her the proper way, but he didn't want people to misinterpret the mourning for her, for the regret that may have happened as a result of her death. So he holds it, he controls his emotions. Think about how beautiful that is. That here you have a man who has spent his whole life learning to give, to love humanity. He was the biggest, I think of Abraham as this big, beard, and you want to hug the guy. You want to love him. He's just a loving, most amazing person. But he's in pain, and you see someone who's that loving and in pain, you want to go ahead and do everything you can to alleviate that pain. But Abraham is the man who's in control of his emotions. He doesn't allow his scenario to control him. He controls it where you think it wasn't hard for him to go up and offer Yitzchak as a korban. Of course it was. It was painful. It was super painful for him. But yet somehow he finds the strength to what? Control his emotions. Even though God promised and said, I'm going to make you into a great nation, he holds back his love for his son to go ahead and show that he's in control of his emotions, not the other way. His emotions are not in control of him. Same over here with Sarah, continuation of the same thing. So let's go back again. Abraham is told, right? We say he comes ba bayamim. Okay, Vashem berech Abraham bakol. Right? So the Chachamim tell us that Abraham is the first person in the world to get old. That before Abraham, people would age, but you wouldn't see it on their face because Abraham and Yitzchak were twins. They looked exactly alike. Even though he was much older, he didn't get gray, he didn't get wrinkly, and therefore our default programming for our bodies is not to age until Abraham prayed that people should age so that they could go ahead and have this distinction between the younger generations and the older generations. So we could go ahead and recognize that there's hierarchy here, that we should give kavod to those that are older than us. So he's the one that goes ahead and changes this. He changes this aspect in reality, which is why I believe on some level we'll find a way to reverse this, because this is Abraham changing the nature of the world. This is not the way God intended it. Did not intend for us to get old, gray, and old, right? He wanted us to be evil and equal and have that ability of continuously growing regardless of how old we feel and so on and so forth. But he does this is his way of giving humanity the opportunity to take advantage of their days, because our days are numbered. We're not here forever. But Abraham is a long-term investor. He's a hodler, right? He's someone who's always holding on. He's long-term investing because he understands that every moment of time here has infinite ramifications for history. So how do we deal with this idea that Abraham, we learned the idea of a wedding from the ceremony from Abraham and Efron. So this is why I'm going to give you an answer which I think is beautiful. I hope those of you that are married, you felt the same way. But you see, in the deal of Abraham and Efron, each person walked away thinking they got a good deal. Efron's like, oh my God, this guy Abraham, I just got the most amount of money. What a dib. I took all this money from him, 10 times the price, 100 times the price. Who cares about the land that I gave him? And Abraham walks away from the deal saying, what a dib, what an idiot. I got the best deal over here. I got Hebron. Hebron is the gateway. It is the place, the entrance between the physical world and the spiritual world. I own a piece of land that gives me access to infinity. and this guy just sold it to me for a bunch of little pennies. Who cares about the money? That's finite, but I got infinity. The Chachamim want us to learn how to make a marriage, how to create this deep union between two people from this deal, because each one walked away thinking they got a better deal. Abraham's like, I got a better deal, and Efron says he gets a better deal. When you're standing under the chuppah, you're supposed to feel the same way. This is why Chachamim want us to learn about marriages from this particular incident. When a chatan is standing in the room under the chuppah, when he's standing there ready to go ahead and receive God, where these two souls are being united, you're supposed to feel that, hey, just like Efron and Abraham had this feeling that they got the best deal, I'm supposed to feel the same way. I'm supposed to feel like I got this ability of getting everything that I possibly dreamed of. That's why we learn it from marriage. Last idea, and then we're going to call it a day. In the Parasha before, we know that Sarah tells Abraham to send away Yishmael, right? And Hashem says, Shema b'kol ishtecha. You have to listen to your wife. There's a special koach, a special power that women have, a special intuition, a special spiritual force they have. And sometimes men don't understand it, but there's something beautiful and profound about a woman's opinion, and we can't ignore it. So Sarah says, send him away. God backs up Sarah and says, Shema b'kol ishtecha. Over there, Rashi tells us that Sarah Imenu was greater than Abraham in Nevuah, greater than Abraham in prophecy. And Rashi in this week's Parasha tells us the reason why Sarah Imenu dies is because of hearing the news that Abraham is about to go ahead and sacrifice Yitzchak. She hears about the Akedah, and this is why she dies. Rashi says in the Pasuk, L'spod l'Sarah l'bichta, Nismacha mitat Sarah l'Akedat Yitzchak. The Parshiyot are connected. Why? L'fi sha'al yedei b'sarot ha'akedah. When she heard about this, the story of the Akedah, that he was about to slaughter him, parcha nishmata mimenu umeta. Her soul was jumped out of her, and that's why she died. So here you have a woman who's greater than Abraham, greater than Abraham, hears about the story of Akedat Yitzchak and drops dead. How is that possible? Why didn't Abraham drop dead? He's not as great as his wife. His wife is greater than him. Why is it that Abraham is able to pass this test and Sarah is not? Okay, I titled this class Walking in Other People's Shoes, and I want to end with this. Each of us are given a unique set of challenges that only you can pass. No one can be you. No one can overcome your unique set of challenges. Only you can. You may look across the hall and say, "Oh, I want that person's challenge. I want to have the things they have. I want to deal with I want to deal with their Yisurim. I want to deal with their challenges." No. This week's Parasha teaches you that when you try to step into the shoes of somebody else, not only can you not walk in their shoes, you get spiritually overloaded and your soul leaves. Sarah did not have the siyata d'shmaya to overcome that challenge. It was Abraham's challenge. Abraham can pass it because it's his challenge. But once Sarah stepped into his shoes, boom, her soul leaves her. We are given everything that we need to overcome the circumstances in our lives. There's lots of trials and tribulations, lots of challenges, lots of unique opportunities, but the Parasha is about our lives, about our days. How are we coming with our days? How are we investing with our time? How are we making the most of the world that we live in? Be mindful that everything that you have is a blessing, that all the challenges you have are uniquely yours, and not only they're uniquely yours, but they're given to you because you have the ability of overcoming the challenge that you face on a day-to-day basis and nobody else can. Don't look across the hall. Absorb what you have, accept the things that you are dealing with, and recognize that only you have the ability of overcoming it. I bless you that you should have an amazing week. And most importantly, you should embrace every single moment of your reality, every single moment of your time. Never give up Abraham did not give up. He had every reason to give up. Even the promises that God gave him that weren't even secured. His love of his life dies, gone. But he still figures out a way of moving on and stepping up and doing the things he needs to do to achieve his unique greatness. May we be blessed. May we come with our days. And remember, if Abraham is blessed with everything, my friends, so are you. Have a Shabbat Shalom Avarach. Looking forward to seeing you all in person soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
I missed that, Rabbi. I missed that.
Ah.